All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick on the Power. So I'm going to make a list of my top 5 most shredded bodybuilders in the history of bodybuilding, including some guys that had conditioning that was so good it would change the course of bodybuilding history. So let's get right into it. So coming in at number 5, you have Frank Zane. Now, in my opinion, you really can't have a top 5 list of most shredded bodybuilders without including Frank Zane, because Frank Zane was one of the first guys to really do this and come in much smaller than the other guys. But his conditioning was so damn good that he would beat guys much bigger than himself. Case in point, back in 1968, Frank Zane defeated a young but very big Arnold Schwarzenegger at the 1968 Mr. Universe competition, and the reason for that was because he was so much better conditioned than Arnold. And that made Frank Zane one of only 3 men to ever defeat Arnold Schwarzenegger on a bodybuilding stage. Now, Frank Zane only weighed roughly 190 pounds on stage, and his conditioning and aesthetics really raised the bar for the other competitors to come in with that much better conditioning and have crazier lines and crazier aesthetics and better posing. So Frank Zane really set the bar high for these other guys because his conditioning was that good. And of course, Frank Zane won the Mr. Olympia competition from 1976 to 1979, making him a 3-time Mr. Olympia winner, giving him conditioning that was the best in the world 3 times. Now, coming in at number 4, we have Rich Gaspari. Now, I have Rich Gaspari on this list because he was the first guy ever to have striated glutes on a bodybuilding stage, and he was the guy that set the bar higher than anybody else because up until that point, striated glutes weren't even a thing in bodybuilding. They were barely even judged. But when he came along with those shredded glutes, he really made that, a new judging point in bodybuilding. If you were to be conditioned, your glutes had to be conditioned as well. So he was really the one that set that standard. Of course, he won the 1989 first ever Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio. And of course, he was the multiple-time runner-up at the Olympia and the training partner to Mr. Olympia Lee Haney. And even though Rich was a much smaller guy than many of the other bodybuilders on stage, he was often much better conditioned than some of these guys he was beating on the Olympia stage, and that's why he comes in at number 4 on this list. So coming in at number 3, I have a bodybuilder that I'm sure a lot of you guys probably haven't heard of, but you might have seen this picture of him. So Alejandro Gali. This is a bodybuilder that I think has one of the most impressive photos in the history of bodybuilding. This photo of him in particular is probably one of the freakiest and most insane bodybuilding pictures I have ever seen. So it's a shot of him on stage from the back. You can see the shredded lower back, the Christmas tree in the lower back, how conditioned the lats are, but in particular, how shredded his glutes are, man. I mean, this guy looks insanely shredded on stage. And in my opinion, this is a back shot that I don't think anybody else will ever replicate in terms of freakiness and conditioning. I mean, this will go down in history as one of the most iconic bodybuilding photos, mark my words. So Alejandro Gali has won the 2013 and 2012 Arnold Classic Amateur overall titles. And prior to that, he competed primarily in the WABBA bodybuilding organization. So even though he's not that well known and he doesn't compete in the IFBB, I just think it's certainly worthy of having him on this list due to this one photo alone, because his conditioning from the back, arguably one of the most conditioned bodybuilders from the back that, has ever been seen in history, particularly with these photos. So coming in the number 2 spot, we have a bodybuilder named Helmut Strebel. Now, I've done a video on him in the past, and this guy, some of the photos of him, I think, this is like the lowest body fat percentage I've ever seen on a human being. I mean, this guy, while he doesn't have that much muscle mass, he's 6'3" and roughly 215 pounds. This guy is one of the most shredded guys I've ever seen in my life. I mean, like 0 body fat on this guy's frame. So this guy is an Austrian bodybuilder. He's a former winner of the Mr. Austria competition, and he's been competing in bodybuilding since 1995. He's currently more active as a fitness model now, but he competed as recently as the 2014 Miami Pro World Championships, which he won, and he primarily competes in the Masters division when he competes in any shows now in the 40-plus category. So he has been bodybuilding for about 25 plus years now, but he now focuses more on fitness modeling and showing off that freaky conditioning. So coming in the number 1 spot, I think you have to have Andreas Munzer. Now, Andreas Munzer is a guy, obviously probably the most well-known guy in the IFBB for his conditioning, arguably one of the most conditioned guys in the history of the IFBB. And the reason I have him in number 1 is because I believe his extreme condition was the reason he died. So he was so dedicated to coming in with that crazy, freaky conditioning. He did it to the point where it actually ended his life. So a lot of people will speculate that in 1996 when he passed away, the main cause of death was the abuse of diuretics, which is the primary agent responsible for that crazy shredded look, that paper-thin skin, and getting that last-minute water weight out of the way. And Andreas is probably the biggest bodybuilder on this list in terms of a guy with a ton of muscle mass, bringing that muscle mass in a crazy shredded package, weighing about 240 pounds on stage. He would come in with still a pretty significant amount of size, but pretty much always diced to the bone. His best placing would be a 3rd place finish at the 1990 Arnold Classic and a 9th place finish several times at the Mr. Olympia. Then in 1996, the Arnold Classic would be his second to last show, placing 6th at the 1996 Arnold. That was something that kind of always eluded him. His goal was always to win the Arnold. He was a fellow Austrian bodybuilder as well, similar to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I think it's kind of funny that number 1 and 2 on this list are both Austrian bodybuilders. There's got to be something in the water over there in Austria. So that's the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy it, and let me know in the comment section below who you would have in your top 5, or if you would add or subtract anybody from my list. Thank you guys for watching the video. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.